The Bold Prentice by Rudyard Kipling. This story is very much of the same sort as an unqualified pilot, and shows that when anyone is really keen on his job, he will generally find some older man who is even keener than he who will give him help and instruction that could not be found in a whole library of books. Olaf Swanson's Book of Road Locos Repair, or The Young Driver's Vademecum, was well known in the railway sheds in its day, and was written in the queerest English ever printed, but it told useful facts, and as you will see saved a train at a pinch. It may be worth noticing that young Otley's chance did not come to him till he had worked on and among engineer repairs for some 5 or 6 years, and was well grounded in practical knowledge of his subject. Young Otley's father came to Calcutta in 1857 as fireman on the first locomotive ever run by the Roman 500 Roman 1R, which was then the largest Indian railway. All his life he spoke broad Yorkshire, but young Otley, being born in India, naturally talked the clipped sing-song that is used by the half-castes and English-speaking natives. When he was 15 years old, the Roman 500 Roman 1R took him into their service as an apprentice in the locomotive repair department of the Ajaypur workshops, and he became one of a gang of 3 or 4 white men and 9 or 10 natives. There were scores of such gangs, each with its hoisting and overhead cranes, jackscrews, vices and lathes as separate shops, and their work was to mend locomotives and make the apprentices behave. But the apprentices threw nuts at one another, chalked caricatures of unpopular foremen on buffer bars, and discarded boilers, and did as little work as they possibly could. They were nearly all sons of old employees living with their parents in the white bungalows of Steam Road, or Church Road, or Albert Road, on the broad avenues of pounded brick, bordered by palms and crotons and bougainvilleas and bamboos, which made up the railway town of Ajaypur. They had never seen the sea or a steamer. Half their speech was helped out with native slang. They were all volunteers in the Roman 500 Roman 1 RS railway corpscrew, with red Fassingsan. Their talk was exclusively about the company and its affairs. They all hoped to become engineer drivers earning 600 or 800 a year, and therefore they despised all mere sit-down clerks in the store audit and traffic departments, and ducked them when they met at the company's swimming baths. There were no strikes or tee-ups on the Roman 500 Roman 1R in those days, for the reason that the 10 or 12,000 natives and 2 or 3,000 whites were doing their best to turn the company's employment into a caste in which their sons and relatives would be sure of positions and pensions. Everything in India crystallizes into a caste sooner or later: the big jute and cotton mills, the leather harness and opium factories, the coal mines and the dockyards. And in years to come, when India begins to be heard from as one of the manufacturing countries of the world, the labour unions of other lands will learn something about the beauty of caste, which will greatly interest them. Those were the days when the Roman 500 Roman 1R decided that it would be cheaper to employ native drivers as much as possible, and the sheds, as they called the repair department, felt the change acutely. For a native driver could misuse his engine, they said, more curiously than any 6 monkeys. The company had not then standardized its rolling stock, and this was very good for apprentices anxious to learn about machines, because there were perhaps 20 types of locomotives in use on the road. They were Hawthorne's E-types, O-types outside cylinders, Spaulding and Cushman Dubliners, and short-run Continental-built tank engines, and many others, but the native drivers burned them all out impartially, and the apprentices took to writing remarks in Bengali on the cabs of the repaired ones, where the next driver would be sure to see them. Young Otley worked at first as little as the other apprentices, but his father, who was then a pensione driver, taught him a great deal about the insides of locomotives, and Olaf Swanson, the red-headed Swede, who ran the government mail, the big Thursday express from Sarai Rajgara to Guldi Hout, was a great friend of the Otley family, and dined with them every Friday night. Olaf was an important person, for besides being the best of the mail drivers, he was past master of the big railway Masonic Lodge St. Duncan's, in the East Secretary of the Drivers' Provident Association, a captain in the Roman 500 Roman 1R Volunteer Corps, and which he thought much more of an author, for he had written a book in a language of his own, which he insisted upon calling English, and had printed it at his own expense at the ticket printing works. Some of the copies were buff and green, and some were pinkish and blue, and some were yellow and brown, for Olaf did not believe in wasting money on high-class white paper. Wrapping paper was good enough for him, and besides, he said the colours rested the eyes of the reader. It was called The Art of Road Locos Repair, or The Young Driver's Vademecum, and was dedicated in verse to a man of the name of Swedenborg. It covered every conceivable accident that could happen to an engine on the road, and gave a rough and ready remedy for each, but you had to understand Olaf's written English as well as all the technical talk about engines to make head or tail of it, and you had also to know personally every engine on the Roman 500 Roman 1R, for the Vademecum was full of what might be called locomotive illusions, which concerned the Roman 500 Roman 1R only. Otherwise, it would, as some great locomotive designer once said, have been a classic and a textbook. Olaf was immensely proud of it, and would pin young Artley in a corner, and make him learn whole page it was written all in questions and answers by heart. Never mind what she means, Olaf would shout, you learn her word perfect, and she will help you in the sheds. I drive the mail of all Indiand, what I write and say is true. But I do not wish to learn the book, said young Artley, who thought he saw quite enough of locomotives in business hours. You shall learn. I have great friendship for your father, and so I shall teach you whether you like it or not. Young Artley submitted, for he was really fond of old Olaf, and at the end of 6 months teaching in Olaf's peculiar way, began to see that the Vademecum was a very valuable help in the repair sheds. When broken-down engines of a new type came in, Olaf gave him a copy bound in cartridge paper, and hedged round the margins with square-headed manuscript notes, each line the result of years of experience and accidents. There is nothing in this book, said Olaf, that I have not tried in my time, and I say that the engine is like the body of a man. So long as there is steamed life, you see, so long if you know how you can make her move a little. So he waggled his hand slowly, till a man is dead, or the engine she is at the bottom of a river. You can do something with her, remember that I say it, and I know. He repaid young Artley's time and attention by using his influence to get him made a sergeant in his company, and young Artley, being a keen volunteer and a good shot, stood well with the Roman 500 Roman 1R in the matter of casual leave, when repairs were light in the sheds, and the honour of the Roman 500 Roman 1R was to be upheld at some faraway station against the men of Agra or Bandicoot, the narrow gauge railway towns of the West. Young Artley would contrive to get away and help to uphold it on the glaring dusty rifler ranges of those parts. A prentice never dreamed of paying for his ticket on any line in India, least of all when he was in uniform, and young Artley was practically as free of the Indian railway system as any member of the Supreme Legislative Council, who wore a golden general pass on his watch chain and could ride where he chose. Late in September of his 19th year, he went north on one of his cuff-hunting excursions, elegantly and accurately dressed, with 1/8 of 1 inch of white collar showing above his grey uniform stock, and his Martini Henry rifle polished to match his sergeant's sword in the rack above him. The rains were out, and in Bengal that means a good deal to the railways, for the rain falls for 3 months lavishly, till the whole country is one sea, and the snakes take refuge on the embankment, and the racing floods puff out the brick ballast from under the iron ties and leave the rails hanging in graceful loops. Then the trains run as they can, and the permanent way inspectors spend their nights flourishing about in handcarts pushed by coolies over the dislocated metals, and everybody is covered with the fired rash of prickly heat, and loses his temper. Young Artley was used to these things from birth. All he regretted was that his friends along the line were so draggled and dripping and sulky that they could not appreciate his gorgeousness, for he considered himself very consoling to behold when he cocked his helmet over one eye and puffed the rank smoke of native-made cigars through his nostrils. Until night fell, he lay out on his bunk in his shirt-sleeves, reading the works of G.W.R. Reynolds, which were sold on all the railway bookstalls, and dozing at intervals. Then he found they were changing engines at Guldy Hout, and old Rustumji, a Parsee, was the new driver with number 40 in hand. Young Artley took this opportunity to go forward and tell Rustum exactly what they thought of him in the sheds, where the prentices had been repairing some of his carelessness, in the way of a dropped crown sheet, the result of inattention and bad stoking. Rustum, he said he had bad luck with engines, and young Artley went back to his carriage, and slept. He was waked by a bang, a bump, and a jar, and saw on the opposite bunk a subaltern who was travelling north with a detachment of some 20 English soldiers. "What's that?" said the subaltern. "Rustum, he has blown her up perhaps," said young Artley, and dropped out into the wet, the subaltern at his heels. They found Rustum, he sitting by the side of the line, nursing a scalded foot and crying aloud that he was a dead man, while the gunner guard, who is a kind of extra hand, looked respectfully at the roaring hissing machine. "What has happened?" said young Artley, by the light of the gunner guard's lantern. "Phut Jaya, she has gone smash," said Rustum, he still hopping. "Without doubt, but where?" Cuda jaunty, God knows I am a poor man, number 40 is broke. Young Otley jumped into the cab and turned off all the steam he could find, for there was a good deal escaping. Then he took the lantern and dived under the drive wheels, where he lay face up investigating among spurts of hot water. Deuced plucky, said the subaltern, I shouldn't like to do that myself, what's gone wrong? Cylinder head blown off, coupler rod twisted, and several more things. She is very badly wrecked, oh yes, she is a total wreck, said young Otley, between the spokes of the right-hand driver. Awkward, said the subaltern, turning up his coat collar in the wet. What's to be done then? Young Otley came out a rich black all over his grey uniform with the red facings, and drummed on his teeth with his finger-nails, while the rain fell, and the native passengers shouted questions, and old Rustum, he told the gunner guard to walk back 6 or 7 miles, and wire to someone for help. I cannot swim, said the gunner guard. Go and lie down, and that, as you might say, settled that. Besides, as far as one could see by the light of the gunner guard's lantern, all Bengal was flooded. Olaf Swanson will be at Sarai Rajgara. With the mail he will be particularly angry, said young Otley. Then he ducked under the engine again with a flare lamp, and sat cross-legged considering things, and wishing he had brought his vademecum in his valise. Number 40 was an old reconstructed mutiny engine with Frenchified cock-nosed cylinders, and a profligate allowance of underpinning. She had been through the sheds several times, and young Otley, though he had never worked on her, had heard much about her, but nothing to her credit. You can lend me some men, he said at last to the subaltern, then I think we shall disconnect her this side, and perhaps notwithstanding she will move we will try. Of course we will, high sergeant, said the subaltern, turn out the men here, and do what this thy's officer tells you. Officer, said one of the privates under his breath, didn't think id enlisted to serve under a sergeant o' volunteers. Airs a 'orrible street accident, looks like mother's tea kettle broke, what dire expect us to do, Mr. Civilian Sergeant? Young Otley explained his plan of campaign while he was ravaging Rustumji's tool chest, and then the men crawled and knelt and levered and pushed and hauled and turned spanners under the engine, as young Otley told them what he wanted was to disconnect the right cylinder altogether and get off a badly twisted coupler rod. Practically number 40's right side was paralyzed, and they pulled away enough ironmongery there to build a culvert with. Young Otley remembered that the instructions for a case like this were all in the vademecum, but even he began to feel a little alarmed as he saw what came away from the engine, and was stacked by the side of the line after 40 minutes of the hardest kind of work. It seemed to him that everything movable was cleared out, and that he might venture to give her steam. She leaked and sweated and shook, but she moved in a grinding sort of way, and the soldiers cheered. Rustum, he flatly refused to help in anything so revolutionary as driving an engine on one cylinder, because he said heaven had decreed that he should always be unlucky, even with sound machines. Moreover, as he pointed out, the pressure gauge was jumping up and down like a bartlemp. The stoker had long since gone away into the night, for he was a prudent man. Deuced queer thing altogether, said the subaltern, but look here, if you like, ill chuck on the coals, and you can drive the old jigamaru if shall go. Perhaps she will blow up, said the gunner guard. Shouldn't at all wonder by the sound of her. Where's the shovel, said the subaltern. Oh no, she's all right according to my book, I think, said young Otley. Now we will go to Sarai Rajgara if she moves. She moved with long SSGs of exhaustion and lamentation. She moved quite 7 miles an hour, and for the floods were all over the liner. The staggering voyage began. The subaltern stoked 4 shovels to the minute, spreading them thin, and number 40 made noises like a dying cow, and young Otley discovered that it was one thing to run a healthy switching locomotive up and down the yards for fun when the head of the yard wasn't looking, and quite another to drive a very sick one over an unknown road in absolute darkness and tropic rain. But they felt their way along with their hearts in their mouths till they came to a distant signal, and whistled frugally, having no steam to spare. This might be Sarai Rajgara, said young Otley hopefully. Looks more like the Suez Canal, said the subaltern. I say, when an engine kicks up that sort of a noise, she's a little impatient, isn't she? That sort of noise was a full-poured, furious, yelling whistle 1/2 mile up the line. That is the down mail, said young Otley. We have delayed Olaf 2 hours and 45 minutes. She must surely be in Sarai Rajgara. Don't wonder she wants to get out of it, said the subaltern. Golly, what a country. The line here dipped bodily under water, and young Otley sent the gunner guard on to find the switch to let number 40 into the siding. Then he followed and drew up with a doleful whop whop whop, by the side of the great 45 and 6-wheel coupled 18-inch inside cylinder number 25, all paint and lacquer, standing roaring at the head of the down mail. The rest was all water-flat level, and solid from one point of the horizon to the other. Olaf's red beard flared like a danger signal, and as soon as they were in range, some knobby pieces of Girardi coal whizzed past young Otley's head. "Your friend very mad," said the subaltern, ducking. "Ah," roared Olaf, "this is the 5th time you make delay, 3 hours delay you make me swans on the mail. Now, I will lose more time to break your head." He swung on to the footboard of number 40, with a shovel in one hand. "Olaf," cried young Otley, and Olaf nearly tumbled backward. "Rustamji is behind." "Of course he always is, but you... how you come here?" "Oh, we smashed up. I have disconnected her, and arrived here on one cylinder. By your book we are only a diagram of an engine, I think." "My book, my very good book, my vademecum Otley, you are a fine driver. I forgive my delays, it was worth." "Oh, my book," and Olaf leapt back to number 25 shouting things about Swedenborg and steam. "That is all right," said young Otley, "but where is Sarai Rajgara? We want assistance." "There is no Sarai Rajgara, the water is 2 feet on the embankment, and the telegraph office is fell in. I will report at Pernal Road. Good night, good boy." The mail train splashed out into the dark, and Otley made great haste to let off his steam, and draw his fire. Number 40 had done enough for that night. "Odd chap, that friend of yours," said the subaltern when number 40 stood empty and disarmed in the gathering waters. "What do we do now, swim?" "Oh no, at 10:45 this morning, that is coming an engine will perhaps arrive from Pernal Road, and take us north. Now we will lie down and go to sleep. You see there is no Sarai Rajgara, you could get a cup of tea here once on a time." "Oh my aunt, what a country," said the subaltern, as he followed Otley to the carriage, and lay down on the leather bunk. For the next 3 weeks Olaf Swanson talked to everybody of nothing but his vademecum and young Otley. What he said about his book does not matter, but the compliments of a mail driver are things to be repeated, as they were to people in high authority, the masters of many engines. So young Otley was sent for, and he came from the sheds buttoning his jacket, and wondering which of his sins had been found out this time. It was a loop line near Ajaypur, where he could by no possibility come to harm. It was light but steady traffic, and a first-class superintendent was in charge, but it was a driver's billet and permanent after 6 months, as a new engine was on order for the loop. The foreman of the sheds told young Otley he might look through the stalls and suit himself. He waited boiling with impatience till Olaf came in, and the two went off together, old Olaf clucking look like a hen all down the sheds, and they chose a nearly new hawthorn No. 239, which Olaf highly recommended. Then Olaf went away to give young Otley his chance to order her to the cleaning pit, and jerk his thumb at the cleaner, and say as he turned magnificently on his heel, "Thursday, 8 o'clock, Malum, understand." That was almost the proudest moment of his life. The very proudest was when he pulled out of Atami Junction through the brickfield on the way to his loop, and passed the down mail with Olaf in the cab. They say in the sheds that you could have heard number 239's whistle from Ranigunj clear to Calcutta.